Okay, so I'm just letting you guys know that I am recording this particular lesson. So that includes everything that you're sharing and everything that you're saying. So be mindful of that. And I will post it on YouTube. This way people can see the great work you're doing. And so I can continue to review the work in case I feel like I missed anything in your presentations. When you go to share in your presentations, everybody has the ability to share, but please be mindful when you click to share your screen, there are two nebulous buttons at the bottom of the screen where it says optimize for video sharing and check for sound. Make sure you check both of those buttons, especially if you do have a video as part of your presentation. Otherwise, we won't be able to hear it. You'll have to unshare and reshare, and it just wastes a lot of time. I'm still cutting everyone off at the 10-minute mark. And, so the next team, be prepared for that. We're just going to start at 11:03 exactly. This way I can get the last couple of people in and I could take that attendance. Does anyone have any last minute questions? Nope, everybody's okay. All right, I'm just gonna ask if there is someone missing from your team, because once you guys do share, I can't see the participant list anymore. And it looks like we are missing one person from this period, so I haven't figured out who it is quite yet. That you just mention it to me, say, hey, this person hasn't logged in, if it happens to be on your team, or type it in the chat. This way it doesn't come up verbally. Actually, yeah, do that instead, type it in the chat. All right, so it's 11:03. Ugly Ducklings, whenever you're ready to get started, the floor is yours.
Okay, so good morning. We are Group 1, the Ugly Ducklings. Today we'll be presenting to you the Japanese creation story, as well as some of the gods associated with Japanese culture. We prepared some haikus to narrate the story as we go along, and we'll be reading one to you after each slide. To preface, the Japanese creation story in the modern day comes from two major sources, the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki, which is the Chronicles of Japan. There are slight variations between the two books, but the main story is essentially the same. So, the Japanese creation myth begins similarly to that of the Greek, with chaos. From this chaos, the plane of high heavens separated from the earth. Following this separation, the three creating deities came about in the heavens, and two reed deities sprouted from the earth. The three creating deities in heaven would create 7 generations of gods, each generation consisting of siblings who procreate to produce the next.
From chaos, heaven, the three creators are born. On earth, the reed sprouts.
On the 7th generation, Izanami and Izanagi were born for the purpose of shaping the earth, which the heavenly deities considered chaotic and displeasing to the eye. In Japanese, their names mean he who invites and she who invites. The two of them would thrust the spear from the floating bridge of heaven into the ocean, and when they lifted the spear, a drop of mud would fall into the ocean, which formed the first island called Onogoro. From there, Izanami and Izanagi would marry and produce the other islands of Japan and the gods of nature.
The two who invite thrust a spear for an island. Gods of nature are born. And on the left here, we have our artistic art piece. This picture depicts Izanami and Izanagi throwing their spear and creating the islands of Japan. And right next to them are the Myoto Iwa, which are the wedded rocks. And the big one represents Izanagi, the male deity, and the small one represents Izanami, the female deity. The rope between them is replaced 3 times a year, and it represents their marriage.
As the process of creation continued, the birth of the fire deity Kagutsuchi fatally burned Izanami. Some versions suggest Izanagi beheaded Kagutsuchi in anger, in which his blood and body parts spawned more gods. Regardless, it was evident that Izanagi was devastated and thus began his journey to Yomi, the underworld, in order to bring Izanami back.
An ill-fated child, born to the flames of tragedy, her death is the first.
After traveling to the underworld, he discovered Izanami ate the underworld's food and couldn't leave. Although he promised to patiently wait and trust his wife, he was overwhelmed by temptation and took a look at her despite her disapproval. Enraged as her appearance as a rotting corpse was seen, She commanded demons to chase after Izanagi, but he successfully fled, rolled a boulder into the entrance, and divorced her. Here we see the separation of the dead and the living, and in addition, we see connections to Greek mythology, such as Persephone being unable to leave the underworld after eating its food, or Orpheus being unable to control his affection and looking back to his dead wife, also unable to resurrect her.
His venture to save ends in nothing but a chase. A stone blocks the way.
When Izanagi returns from Yomi, he bathes in the sea to purify himself, forming deities. As Izanagi purified himself, from his left eye Amaterasu was born. She became the sun goddess and is considered the queen of heaven and creation itself. Although she did not create the universe, she inherits this role from her father Izanagi. As a sun god, she is responsible for the literal rising of the sun and the nourishment of all living creatures. Her descendants are known to be the emperors of Japan, therefore all emperors have divine lineage.
Dusk from the left eye, she rules over the heavens. Her sons, emperors.
From his right eye came Tsukuyomi, the moon god. He married Amaterasu. One day, Ukemochi, the goddess of food, held a feast. Because Amaterasu could not attend, Tsukuyomi went in her place. When he saw Ukemochi create the feast by spitting out rice, fish, and dare from her mouth and pulling other food out of her body, he was so horrified that he killed her. When Amaterasu heard of the news, she saw Tsukuyomi as someone evil and unworthy of returning to the heavens. And thus their separation became day and night. For all eternity, Tsukuyomi will continue to pursue Amaterasu across the night sky without ever reaching her. That is why even during eclipse, the sun will run from the moon.
The moon from the right. A marriage torn by mistrust divides day and night.
Fusaro, the storm god, was known for being very deceptive. He pranked his sister Amaterasu, and as a result, she went into hiding in a cave. 800 deities had to use mirrors and jewels to lure her out. She banished him from heaven, and he began to wander around the earth for food. When wandering around the earth, Fusaro discovered an old man and woman crying because a serpent named Orochi has been eating their daughters every year. He married the last daughter and decided to fight Orochi. As he encountered the serpent, his sword broke as he was cutting the middle tail. Turns out there's a great sword named Kusanagi no Tsurugi concealed inside the body, and Susanoo presented it to the gods in heaven. This would explain why the mirror, jewels, and the sword are considered symbols of imperial power. The sword also symbolizes the Japanese belief of lineal succession being unbroken for ages. After this journey, Susanoo decided to live on Earth and eventually gave up his power to Amaterasu's grandson. The grandson had a son named Jimmu, who became the first emperor of Japan.
Exiled from heaven, the storm god fought a serpent for his sword and life. Japanese mythology also includes so many more gods that are all connected to the natural forces. Here are a couple more that were very important, and we also found them interesting. Through union and death come many others who watch over land and sea.
As we read this Japanese myth, we made connections to modern-day culture and philosophy. We thought that the Japanese emphasized harmony, order, and self-development because of the early chaos of the gods. Also, this myth is a story of how Japan and the world came to be. It shows humans' innate curiosity to discover and explain the unknown, just like the Big Bang Theory. In addition, we realized that the superstition of how it is unlucky to see your future spouse the day before the wedding might be related to this myth. During ancient times, the bride's family would prevent the groom from finding out what his future wife would look like until the last possible minute, just so he can't back out of the marriage. In the myth, Izanagi left after he found Izanami rotting in the underworld, which could have given rise to this belief.
These are the questions we created based upon this presentation, and please raise your hand if you want to answer these questions. Number 1, what causes Izanami's death? Aram Lu.
It's B, the fire god.
Yes, thank you. Number 2, who is born from the right eye of Izanagi? Christian.
It's C, Amaterasu.
No, sorry. It's actually B, Tsukuyomi. Number C, who is Susanoo punished for? Derek?
Is it C, pranking Amaterasu?
Yes, C. Number 4, who is the god of the trees?
Isn't it C, Kukunochi no Kami?
Yes, it's C. Number 5, what does Izanami's name mean?
It would be she who invites.
Yes, it is a she who invites. These are questions we created to think further about. Do you think Susanoo was unfairly punished? Iram?
I think that it was unfair punishment because it was basically just a prank that they took too far. Like they realized they thought it was more than just a prank, but I don't think it was fairly punished.
Okay, guys, I'm just gonna call time. Great job. Thank you. Team 2, you're up when.
How do you stop share? Okay.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. So today, Group Camp Fastball is very excited to present to you the creation story of the Cherokee Nation. We will discuss how the earth was created, how plants, animals, and humans became, and how the people of Cherokee explain natural phenomena. And then we will connect their creation story to modern science and religion. But first, we're going to take a look at this drawing.
All right, so this was the artistic piece our group decided to draw to present the Cherokee creation myths. And while you guys take a look at this, I'll give you guys a brief summary of the creation myth. So it all started with Earth being water, and the water beetle explored under the water and found mud, which expanded and became Earth's land. And from there, the rest of the animals really worked together to create stuff like mountains, which was created by the buzzard/bird. And in the picture, in the drawing, you guys can see 4 strings in the background, and it represented an animal who attached the sky to the earth. So in all, it really shows the emphasis of the importance of animals for Earth to work. And in the next video, we'll continue to show how animals work together to create something as complex as Earth.
I think there's no sound to the video. I apologize. All right, let's try again.
Creation. When all was water, the animals were in the heavens. Creation. When all was water, the animals were in the heavens, but it was very much crowded, and they were wanting more room. They wondered what was below the water, and at last the little water beetle offered to go and see if it could learn. It darted in every direction over the surface of the water, but could find no firm place to rest. Then it dived to the bottom and came up with some soft mud, which began to grow and spread on every side until it became the island which we call the Earth. It was afterward fastened to the sky with 4 cords, but no one could remember who did this. At first, the Earth was flat and very soft and wet. The animals were anxious to get down and sent out different birds to see if it was dry yet, but they found no place to rest and came back again to the heavens. Finally, they sent out the buzzard and told him to go and make ready for them. This was the great buzzard, the father of all the buzzards we see now. He flew over all the earth, low down near the ground, and it was still soft. When he reached the Cherokee country, he was very tired, and his wings began to flap and strike the ground. And wherever they struck the earth, there formed a valley, and where they turned up again, there formed a mountain. When the animals above saw this, they were afraid that the whole world would be in mountains, so they called him back, but the Cherokee country remained full of mountains. When the earth was dry and the animals came down, it was still dark, so they got the sun and set it on course to go across the island from east to west every day, just overhead. It was too hot this way, and the crawfish had his shell scorched a bright red. His meat was spoiled, and the Cherokee did not eat it. The animals raised the sun until it was just under the sky arch. Now it was just right, and they left it this way. There was another world under this, and it is like ours in every way, but with different seasons. The streams that come down from the mountains are the trails by which we reach this underworld, and the springs at their heads are the doorways by which we enter.
All right, so now I'm going to recap some of the main points from the creation story and connect it to nature. Unlike many other myths, the Cherokee placed more emphasis on animals and nature over humans and gods. And so 2 of the main animals are the water beetle, who created the earth, and the buzzard, who was asked to explore the earth. As the video explained, the buzzard created all these mountains and valleys, which was a representation of the rocky terrain where the Cherokee tribe resided. So as you can see in the map, the circle is where the Appalachian Mountains run. And as you can see, it takes up quite a bit of the territory that the Cherokee resided in. So that's why they had placed such a significance on the buzzard. One really interesting detail from the story that we thought about was how the Cherokee described the underworld as having opposite seasons. And while this might seem like trivial, it's kind of interesting to see how these people with no contact to the southern hemisphere were able to like model the earth in their creation myth. And lastly, we're going to talk about how humans were created. The first people in the world were just a brother and a sister, and a brother decided to hit his sister with the fish and told her to multiply. And following this, she gave birth to a child every 7 days. However, this led to overpopulation, so women were forced to have just one child every year.
There are several stories that connect the Cherokee to modern philosophy. When animals and plants were created, they were told to stay up for 7 nights. Most animals were not able to stay up with a small few that succeeded given special powers. The chosen trees were able to stay green and were deemed best medicine, while the trees that failed had to lose their hair every winter. The chosen animals, which were the owl and the panther, were able to see at night and were able to hunt their prey that hid in the night. This relates to social Darwinism, which states that the strongest survive, and is shown by how the strongest animals and plants were treated. It is evident that the Cherokee valued strength and looked upon those strong positively. What do you believe is evident in Cherokee society, having only given the animals and plants given this opportunity? I, I think since it's the animals and plants, it shows that they are very big in this society.
Okay, so as Jared stated before, the Cherokee mythology has several stories that explain natural occurrences, the first fire being one of them. So the world was suffering from the cold and darkness up until the thunders, who are mythical beings living in the sky, sent lightning and sparked a fire on a sycamore tree growing on an island. Even though there was a fire brought to the world, there was a problem of harnessing it because even with several attempts, many animals could not capture the fire and spread it to others. So the raven, screech owl, hooting owl, and 2 black snakes all attempted to capture the fire, but ultimately failed because they all succumbed to the harsh conditions of blinding smoke and immense heat. The water spider was the last animal to volunteer, and with basically all hope being lost, the spider was able to skillfully weave a bowl of thread, which she used to store a small coal of fire and bring back to the rest of the world. With fire now being prevalent throughout the world, the animals were forced to feed it, afraid that it might harm them if they didn't. The Cherokees valued fire because it symbolized the purity of creation and represented the sun, which is why the story is so crucial to Cherokee mythology today.
Okay, so another important story of the Cherokee history was the deluge. So a long time ago, a man had a dog which began to go down to the river every day and look at the water and howl. And one day, the man got really angry at his dog and scolded him. And the dog responded and said that there will be a flood and that the man should immediately build a raft to save his family, but that he would have to throw the dog into the water first. And the dog said, "If you don't believe me, you should check my neck." And when the man looked at the dog's neck, the skin was already peeling off and the bone stuck out. So the man believed the dog and he started building a raft. And when the rain started coming and the flood came, everybody drowned except for the man and his family. But when the rain started settling down, the man one day heard sounds of dancing and music on the other side of this mountain. So when the man stood atop the mountain and looked over, all he saw were bones. And then he realized that it was like the ghosts of the dead people who were dancing. So what's another story that had a very similar concept to the deluge? Willie?
This is like Noah's Ark.
Yes, that's like one of the things that we were talking about. It had a connection to like Noah's Ark from Christian mythology. Christianity.
Okay, we're gonna have some questions for everyone. So the first question is, which animal was tasked to explore the earth below?
Hey
Sandra?
guys, sorry, we got to call time, so we'll just clear this question and then it's team 3.
See the great buzzard.
Yes, it is a great buzzard.
So our group did our project on the Chinese creation myths. Oh my God. What is it? Okay, so the following artistic piece we drew depicts Pangu and Nua, two deities playing a major role in their own way. Here, Nua is shown breathing human life into her mud dolls. And on the right is Pangu, who we'll be talking about in the next slides, and his death essentially manifested in the creation of the natural world. So in the beginning, the universe was nothing but a big black egg full of chaos, also known as the yin and yang forces. And for 18,000 years, Pangu slept inside this egg until eventually he woke up and broke out using his broad axe. As a result, yin and yang separated into heaven and earth. So for another 18,000 years, as the heavens and earth began to grow, Pangu grew along with them, standing in between yin and yang, holding up the sky until the day he died. So they would never reunite and plunge the world into chaos again. And this is a short film produced by Taiko Studios that I condensed that shows another version of Pangu's story in which he uses his powers to carve out the features of the earth and creates the first human being, also the baby you're about to see, with his spirit. And you'll notice how humans are depicted as his children. And there's a moment where he physically views the baby as a reflection and extension of himself and his ideals. Please. Okay.
So after Pangu died, each part of him turned into something else in the world. For example, his breath turned into wind and clouds, his eyes turned into the sun and moon, and his body turned into mountains. And humans descended from the fleas and the lice that were all over his body. It's said that his spirit went into humans, which is the reason that humans are believed to be the soul of all matter. The concept of yin and yang is one that's really important in Taoism, and it's the idea that everything has to have balance. Yin and yang are opposing and complementary forces that have to exist in everything for there to be balance and harmony. In the Pangu creation story, yin and yang are the original forces in the universe, and they formed the earth and the heavens, yin being the earth and yang the heavens. So the concept of yin and yang is really important in this myth as well as just all across Chinese culture.
There are also different versions of creation stories separate from Pangu, such as the creation story of Nuwa, the goddess of creating humanity. The basic story is that Nuwa created the first humans by molding figures from the earth because she was super lonely and found peace in making things with her hands. She gave them physical traits similar to her own with the exception of her snake tail, where she gave them feet instead. She also gave them the ability to bear children. There are many variations of myths about Nuwa saving humanity, like how she had to marry her own brother to establish a new human race, or how she mended the collapsing sky. Although she is highly praised and respected, she is super humble and never boasts about her achievements. I thought this quote from the story Nuwa Mends the Sky was interesting because it shows a contrast from Greek heroes like Odysseus, who struggle with hubris, excessive pride. The legend of Nuwa also connects to feminism because it tells us about the respected importance that women have had in Chinese society since the beginning of time. Despite this, feminist expression and gender equality have been and still are controversial in China. Another creation story is Jade Emperor Yu Huang, and he is considered the supreme ruler of heaven and the first emperor of China. In one version of creation, it is believed that the Jade Emperor molded humans from clay and left them to harden in the sun, and that the rain is the cause of abnormalities and sickness. Other accounts say that the Jade Emperor used to be a mortal prince looking after the needy in his kingdom, but then he earned the immortal status of Jade Emperor by devoting his life to meditation, studying Taoist philosophy, and committing selfless acts to improve the lives of people. In modern Chinese culture, he is considered a significant mythical figure, especially celebrated and honored in Chinese New Year festivals.
In addition to the various creation stories, there are also many gods, goddesses, and deities represented in Chinese mythology. A very popular one that often shows up in various TV shows and movies would be the dragon, a symbol of wisdom, strength, and luck. One of the gods, this one being of the rain and sea, is a dragon named the Yinglong. Shangdi is a supreme god of law, order, justice, and creation, and is the king of all gods, a parallel to Zeus in a way. He is considered the ancestor of all Chinese, and is the one who supposedly gave them their culture, along with being the one to determine if a dynasty was going to continue or not, in the form of the mandate of heaven. The Hera to Shangdi's Zeus would be Shi Wangmu, or Queen Mother of the West, who has complete control over life, death, creation, and destruction. She's most involved in Taoism and is seen as a symbol of protection to all Taoist women. Unlike their Greek counterparts, these two are often showcase humility and kindness. Chang'e is another very popular goddess in the Chinese mythology and literature, and is the basis of the Mid-Autumn Festival. There are many variations of her story, but the overall gist is that since she drank the elixirs of immortality but at her husband, Hou Yi, the archer god, she can no longer be with him, and now resides on the moon alone, thus starting the tradition of sharing mooncakes with family. Xinu is the goddess of love and is part of a very popular myth in which she and a cowherd fall in love, yet gets separated by a heavenly river, the Milky Way, when Shangdi decides to bring Xinu back to the heavens. They can only meet once on the 7th day of the 7th month, which is celebrated in a lot of other East Asian countries besides China. For example, the Tanabata festival in Japan. So to wrap it all up, we have a Google form quiz for everyone to take. It is 5 questions and it shouldn't take that much time, and you'll probably be able to view your scores right after you submit. So good luck.
And people can access that quiz on Google Classroom?
It's on the Google Slides, so you can click the link on the Google Slides, which I shared on Classroom.
Okay, okay, thank you. While you guys are finishing up that quiz, Team 4, you are ready to go whenever you're ready to go.
Wait, Miss Fusaro, should I start the time? Like I have a timer in front of me, so should I start it once we actually present?
Yeah, so I'm counting you guys as of 11:34, so hopefully you get started by then. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be able to. Okay. Okay, if you want to start.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about the Babylonian creation story, which is known as the Enuma Elish. So some of the major gods and deities in Babylonian culture include Apsu, which is Apsu and Tiamat, which are both primal beings, one made of fresh water and one is the goddess of the oceans, or salt water. Then there's Marduk, who's known as the king of gods and who is the central hero in the creation myth. There's Ea, the lord of the earth, and Lil, the lord of the air, and Anu, the sky god. And together, these three gods make up the trio of deities. And then we also have Nana, who is known as the moon god. So the story of Babylon dates back to the late second millennium BCE. And at the start of the myth, there are the two primal beings, the god Apsu and the goddess Tiamat. They were the parents of heaven and earth, which weren't yet named. And together they created an assembly of many younger gods who were extremely disruptive and bothered Apsu when he was doing his work. So he devised a plan to kill the gods, but his eldest son overheard the plans and defeated him instead. Ea now ruled the fresh waters. Tiamat consulted with Kingu and was angered from the loss of her lover and decided to wage war on the assembly of the younger gods. She united an army of 11 horrible monsters. So Ea's son Marduk then came before the assembly of gods and said that he would kill Tiamat in exchange for supreme power. And the assembly, since they feared Tiamat and her horde, agreed, and they gifted Ea vestments, weapons, and a throne. Fully armed, Marduk slew Tiamat and took the tables of destiny from Kingu, which legitimized his reign. And the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flew from Tiamat's eyes, and Marduk binded the monsters to his feet as trophies. Tiamat's body was split in half. From one half, Marduk created the sky, in which he created the stars, gave rise to Nanu, the moon god, and marked the dwellings of the triad of deities. Marduk also killed Kingu and created Lulu, the first man from his blood. The myth ends with the gods worshiping and praising Marduk.
Now, there are multiple parallels with the Bible within this story. So the first two being very self-explanatory, that before there was creation, the world was actually just a realm of water. And then the order versus chaos, how Tiamat and Marduk having their fight, or Marduk, and then God and the devil. But the thing that I found most interesting was the 7 tablets, meaning the 7 days of creation, because this story was found in the mid-19th century by Austin Henry Layard in the Library of Ashurbanipal. So he found the 7 tablets, they had to translate it, and this is where the story comes from. And people believe that the 7 tablets actually mean the 7 days of creation, also found in the Bible. And the creation of man is going off of this because creation of man within the Babylonian parallel with the Bible, because in the Bible, man is also created on the sixth day.
Alrighty, and so there's the connection to modern philosophy, notably the fact that the largest and most important connection is this idea of destiny. In the Numalish, there is a lot of reference to these tablets of destiny, and the reason for this is because destiny is chosen by the gods for you. You don't really have free will, and that's basically the exact opposite of what's seen today. Christianity, a lot of the Abrahamic religions believe in this idea of free will, that you have the choice over your own actions and you're the master of your own fate. However, because of this difference in philosophy, back then they believed that destiny was chosen for you and you had no real control over this, as the gods had fully laid out your destiny for you.
So now we want to do a little quick fire quiz before we introduce our game about the creation story of the Babylon. And we're just going to do this quick fire. So preferably if you guys could just unmute and tell us the answers. These are going to be pretty quick and simple. So first of all, what is the name of the Babylonian creation story?
Numa
Elish.
Yep.
What is the name of the Babylonian creation story?
Yeah. So next question is, when was the creation story most likely written?
The late 2nd millennium BCE.
Yeah.
Next question. The central texts of the Babylonian creation story are the tablets of? Anyone?
Destiny?
Yeah.
Yep, that's correct.
Blank and blank were the parents of heaven and earth. It's a Tiamat and Apsu.
So next question. Central tenet of the Babylonian creation story is that gods control?
Your fate?
Yeah, destiny.
Yeah, fate or destiny.
Who killed Tiamat? Remember?
Marduk.
Yeah.
What did Marduk do with Tiamat's body?
Separated it into the sky and the earth.
Yeah.
Yep, just put it into.
And then who did the gods at the end of the myth say that man should worship?
Marduk.
Yeah. All right. So the next is actually it's a card game that Christian created, and we can't play it because we're not in person, but he's just going to basically go over the rules of it and explain how it works.
So the game that we created is basically an offshoot of Mafia, but before we can go over everything, I kind of want to go over the significance of each card, because we might not have enough time. So Nick, if you could just scroll down to the first page after this, which would be the back of every card, which on the back of every card is an attempt at a mosaic depiction of the Lion of Ishtar. The Ishtar is the goddess of love and war. And the Lion of Ishtar is pictured on Babylonian gates, and I thought it would be fitting to be on the back of every card to represent the war between the forces of Tiamat and the young gods. And if you go to the next card, we have a depiction of one of the Babylonian depictions of Tiamat. This is your Mafia card if you were to play the game. This would be the card that would denote that you're on the team of Tiamat and you'll be trying to defeat the young gods. If you scroll down again, we have a Babylonian depiction of Marduk, the champion of the king of the gods, and in this game he's the doctor, but in this rule set, if we have time to get to it, he's more of a defender. He's the one who kind of holds the most strength over the force of Tiamat. If you scroll down, once again, we have a card that represents Mususu, which is a snake dragon that was Marduk's spirit animal. In the sense of the game, this would be the investigator card, the card that would be able to find the roles of everyone else. And the final card that we have is a depiction of a Babylonian sword. This is your town card if you were to be playing Mafia. It's the card that represents you don't really have a special knight action, but you're fighting for the forces of the young gods against Tiamat. So I just want to note that the colors on the cards don't have any special meaning to the myth, but instead that comes from more of a game design point of blue representing the forces of the young gods or good, and red representing the forces of Tiamat. So the game essentially works like Mafia or Among Us, if you've ever played either of those. The forces of Tiamat are trying to kill all the young gods and end up with a number of young gods that is equal or less than the number of the agents of Tiamat that are active in the game, which in an ideal situation of 10 players would be 10. During the night, the player with the Marduk card can take an action to defend one player. If the Marduk player successfully defends a player and guesses who the Tiamat players are trying to kill, the Tiamat players will be unable to kill that player and they will suffer 1 wound. If the Tiamat players suffer 3 wounds, then they lose the game automatically, and the young gods win. And the final card with a special role is Musushu, which was, as I said, was the investigator card, where you are able to investigate 1 player every night in order to find out what their role is, whether they are a young god or if they're an agent of Tiamat. In the day phase, the players are to discuss amongst themselves, spread out whatever information they feel is necessary or is fitting for that round. And then at the end of the day phase, they will choose a player to vote as an agent of Tiamat. And if the player receives a plurality of the votes, they will be killed in that day phase. The young gods win if both agents of Tiamat are found and voted out in the day phase, or if the agents of Tiamat suffer 3 wounds. I believe that is the end of our time.
Yep, perfect timing. Pegasus's wings, ready for you.
All right, so we're group 5, and we're going to be talking about the creation story according to the Aztecs and how it relates to modern religion. So just a quick synopsis of the story. There was a God in the beginning, in the void, and he was a lord of duality. So he was pretty much good and bad, male and female, and then gave birth to 4 other gods, the gods of the north, south, east, and west. And these gods needed to create a son, so they ended up taking turns, and there were 5 sons in total. So the first cycle of the sun, the element of it was earth, and the god of the god of west was the first son, and he decided to sacrifice himself to be an energy source for the earth, but he only managed to become half of a sun. So then the god of east had a disagreement with the god of the west, and and the god of west won. The god of east won, and then the god of west sent jaguars on earth to destroy the giants and ended the era of the first sun. So then the second sun was the god of east, but this era humans became corrupt, like they had a corrupt nature, and as a result, the god of west turned them into monkeys and then sent a hurricane to destroy the monkeys. And it's believed that the current day monkeys are the survivors who survived the hurricane from the god of the east. The god of the west. And then the third son was the god of south, and he stole the god of east's wife, whose name was Tialak, and this caused a fight between the god of south and the god of east, and the god of east turned the humans into turkeys, dogs, and butterflies, and the god of west rained fire and ash to destroy them. So then during the era of the fourth son, Tialak's sister reigned during this era, and the god of west and east were jealous and took the sun down, turning the population into the fish and ultimately destroying them. So then the fifth sun, which is believed to be what we're living in now, is overruled by Nanahuatzin. And these are just like a list of the gods. I didn't bother pronouncing their names because I would mess them up. So it's just north, south, east, and west, and then the 2 parents.
So the Aztec religion is very similar to other religions from the area. where they identify the Toltecs as the creators of all culture. The Aztecs also were also known to all people of Mexico as being the least civilized because of their traditions of human sacrifice. And they decided to adapt many of the cultures around them into their own religion. And they have a lot of similarities with other Native American cultures, such as the Iroquois. Next slide. So what's interesting about the myth of the Aztecs is that they acknowledged many aspects that some would consider to be scientific today, such as the fact that prior to the existence of the universe, there was a void and then everything came into being. And they acknowledged a connection between humans and monkeys, as well as giant beasts who ate plants and died prior to humans existing. They also acknowledge the essentialness of sacrifice, which was a big part of their culture. They had the gods sacrifice themselves in order to ensure the earth could survive. And each time that a sun was destroyed, it was because gods and humans gave in to deadly sins, which examples of this could be the second sun was destroyed because of the greed of humans and wrath of gods. Third sun was destroyed because of the lust of the gods. And the fourth sun was destroyed because the gods were envious of each other and wanted to sacrifice themselves to be the sun, which ties back to the fact that sacrifice was extremely important in Aztec culture, and that the gods were willing to kill each other to sacrifice themselves. Next slide.
So Aztec music is connected to the creation story. The Aztecs believed that their music and songs connected them to the gods and nature itself. They would sing songs about their gods and what they did to explain their existence. The drums, the rattle, the flute are some of the instruments that they used, and the most sacred instruments were the tepon azili and the huehueti, both of which were named after gods banished on earth. Through the sacrifices that their gods went through to create the earth and mankind, music also played during human sacrifices to honor their gods.
So there are many similarities between the Aztec creation story and more modern scientific religious beliefs. For example, the Aztecs believed that their first universe began with the birth of the first god, and before that there was nothingness. And today's popular Big Bang theory tells us that before the universe began as a point, there was also a void of nothingness. And another connection is the belief that the universe's creation and destruction is an ongoing cycle. The Aztecs believe that the world has been destroyed 4 times already, and reborn with the sacrifice of a god. And famous cosmologist Alexander Vilenkin believes a similar idea, that the Big Bang is a repeating event and responsible for the creation of many other universes. One more connection involves the Aztecs' belief that their empire was at the center of the universe. Many modern religions, such as Catholicism, believed in a similar idea, which is the geocentric model, where the Earth is the center of the universe and the sun, moon, stars, and planets all orbit Earth. The idea of the geocentric model was adopted by many modern religions and believed to be true until Galileo disproved it, and that resulted in backlash and his punishment.
Okay, so for our 3D model, for our artistic piece, I made this Aztec carving, and as we mentioned before, their belief revolves around the sun and how important the sun is. So this kind of represents the sun, that you can kind of see it, and like here in the middle is a god. Also, you can see the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. And these represent the four gods that represent directions. Also, this dragon in the center, that is the dragon. Its name is, sorry, Sepactli. I think I pronounced that right. It was basically one of the first creations that the Aztec gods made. But the thing is, it kept devouring all the creations after that. So the gods realized they had to destroy it. And when they destroyed it, it broke into sections and created heaven, earth, and the underworld. Like its head made heaven, its tail made the underworld, and the sections of the body made the earth. So, yeah. If you want to see this yourself, you can pan around it. It's on Google Classroom.
The quiz is on Google Classroom. It's under the comments, not the please don't use the pin, and it's self-paced, so you can do it at your own pace.
Thank you guys. I just want to make one quick comment regarding culture. One of the ways that we honor culture, honor each other's culture, honor cultures from the past is pronouncing names correctly, or at least making the attempt to pronounce names correctly. It's just a way of showing respect. So just keep that in mind. All right. And whenever Dionysus's draws is ready to go, we are ready for you.
All right, so our presentation is going to be on the Egyptian creation story. We're going to cover Ra, the creator, the Osiris creation myth, the order of the creation of the gods, which is also shown in our art piece. And then also we're going to cover the Book of the Dead and the Underworld, as well as how it connects to purity. I'm going to paste the quiz link in the chat so that everyone has access to it, but we're also going to share a screen for that as well.
So much like the Greek mythology story, the Egyptian mythology starts with chaos and infinite expanse of darkness and directionless waters. The Egyptians called this Nun. From Nun, Atum, who is the creator god, created himself. Some stories say that he created himself just by uttering his own name. Others said that he created himself just using his will. Atum, he had a son, which is Su, the god of the dry air, and a daughter, Tefnut, who was the goddess of the moist air. From Su and Tefnut came Jeb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. Su, who is the god of the dry air, separated Jeb and Nut, and that's the explanation for the earth we walk on and the sky above us. There are many different explanations for why Jeb and Nut were separated, but there's one explanation was just that it was for the natural order. But the other story claims that Atum declared that Nut should not produce their children, which is much like Kronos and Zeus, who feared that they would be overthrown. But Nut continued to produce her children, which were Osiris, Isis, Nephthys, and Seth. And due to Atum's anger, he told Su to separate Jeb and Nut, and that's why they are forever separated. Humans were said to be created from the eye of Ra. The story for the creation of human is that Ra's eye left him, and when Su and Tefnut tried to retrieve it, it resisted, and when it cried, the tears became human. Another story is that Su and Tefnut went missing, and so Ra sent his eye looking for Su and Tefnut, and when he found them and rejoined, his eyes cried of joy, and those tears created human. There were other stories that claim that humans were created when Ra molded them using clay. And yeah.
So Ra was the sun god of ancient Egypt, and he was considered the most important god, even though he wasn't the first one to emerge. That was Nun. Ra had many names, such as Amun Ra, Atum, Ra Horthaki, and many others. So he was the first being to emerge from the void, who is characterized as Nun. and is the ancestor to almost all the Egyptian gods and goddesses. Even though Ra didn't rule over all of these domains in later myths, he was known as the creator of Earth, the heavens, the underworld, and even humans, as Nick mentioned earlier. The Egyptians saw the sun as Ra's chariot that would travel across the world during the day from sunrise to sunset, and then it would return to the underworld during the night and then come back the following day when the sun would rise again. Because the sun was very important to Egyptians, it provided nourishment to the crops that they grew. Ra was greatly revered by the Egyptians, and many temples were built in his name. To also the pharaohs of Egypt, they claimed to be descendants of Ra in order to validate their rule over the Egyptians.
Okay, so now we're going to go over the creation myth for some of the major gods, being Osiris, basically how he ended up where he is towards the latter part of the Egyptian mythology. So initially, Anubis was considered the god of the dead during the Old Kingdom, but he was later replaced by Osiris, who was his father, and that was during the Middle Kingdom. So the way this happened was initially Osiris was considered to be like the king of the gods, similar to how Zeus was deemed. But then Set, his brother, grew jealous of him. And so he killed him and spread his pieces of his body throughout Egypt. And so Isis and Nephthys, who are Osiris and Set's sisters and also their respective wives, they went and put Osiris back together and brought him to life. And so through this, it allowed him to descend to the underworld. And while this was happening, Isis became pregnant with Horus, who was Osiris's son, and Horus would later claim the throne back from Set through a series of challenges that, although Set ended up cheating and winning them, it was determined by a council of other gods that Horus would become the king because they talked to Osiris, and Osiris deemed that Horus had not killed anyone, whereas Set, his brother, did kill him. And so the throne as king of the other gods should not be held by someone who had committed murder. And that allowed Horus to kind of take his spot as rightful heir to the throne.
So we have a video that we're going to play for you about the Book of the Dead and what people had to do to gain access into the afterlife. So let's play them.
Ani stands before a large golden scale, where the jackal-headed god Anubis is weighing his heart against a pure ostrich feather. Ani was a real person, a scribe from the Egyptian city of Thebes who lived in the 13th century BCE. And depicted here is a scene from his Book of the Dead, a 78-foot papyrus scroll designed to help him attain immortality. Such funerary texts were originally written only for pharaohs, but with time, the Egyptians came to believe regular people could also reach the afterlife if they succeeded in the passage. Ani's epic journey begins with his death. His body is mummified by a team of priests who remove every organ except the heart, the seat of emotion, memory, and intelligence. It's then stuffed with a salt called natron and wrapped in resin-soaked linen. In addition, the wrappings are woven with charms for protection and topped with a heart scarab amulet that will prove important later on. The goal of the 2-month process is to preserve Ani's body as an ideal form with which his spirit can eventually reunite. But first, that spirit must pass through the Duat, or underworld. This is a realm of vast caverns, lakes of fire, and magical gates, all guarded by fearsome beasts. Snakes, crocodiles, and half-human monstrosities with names like He Who Dances in Blood. To make things worse, Apep, the serpent god of destruction, lurks in the shadows, waiting to swallow Ani's soul. Fortunately, Ani is prepared with the magic contained within his Book of the Dead. Like other
So after Ani got through all the monsters and he ended up in the hall of Osiris, he would have to prove himself worthy in front of 42 deities, showing that he hadn't committed any crimes or any sins during his life. And that relates to Christianity because, and a bunch of other religions, that shows to gain access into the afterlife, your life on earth has to be pure and your soul and your heart have to be clear of all wrongdoing.
And now going into the art piece, so we tried to do it in the traditional hieroglyphic style. So you're reading it vertically from the bottom to the top. And basically starting with the Eye of Ra, it's a feminine counterpart to the sun god Ra, and it's an extension of his power equated with the disk of the sun, but it also behaves as an independent entity. And the tears of Ra symbolize humans and humanity, which is why Egyptians call themselves the cattle of Ra. And color also plays a really big symbolism in Egyptian culture. So red represents the healing power of Isis's blood and life itself, and it's an indicator of vitality. Blue represents the heavens and the universe and the color of the Nile, which is associated with fertility, rebirth, and creation. Green represents vegetation, but because Egyptians recognize the cycle of growth and decay, they can associate green with death and resurrection, proving Geb and Osiris, two very conflicting gods. And then yellow represents the ethereal and indestructible because of its close association with the sun and their most powerful god, Atum-Ra. Yeah.
Okay, so next we have a quiz. I added a link to it in the chat so you guys can all access it on your own, but we're gonna go over it together as well. So there we go. So for the first question, what was the darkness that Ra came from?
Noon.
You can just raise your hand or speak out if you want.
The second one? Noon.
Yes, you're correct. She was the god of,
Moist air.
actually it's dry air.
Okay.
So what god do pharaohs claim to be descendants of?
Ra.
Correct. And which of the following is not one of Ra's names?
Ranu.
Yeah, correct. So who were Isis and Nephthys to Osiris and Set?
Wives and sisters?
Yes, they were both their wives and their sisters. And who was the original king of the underworld?
Anubis.
And who conducted the judgment of souls?
Also Anubis.
Correct. So if you guys all have access to the form as well, if you ever want to submit it, yeah, and that is our quiz.
Perfect timing. Thank you guys. Great work as far as the timing is concerned. Really great work all around. Just to let you guys know, I am going to ask for you to do a quick Flipgrid review of one team other than your own. I set the timer on Flipgrid at maximum 90 seconds. You don't actually need to use all 90 seconds. It's fine if you do. There's 4 parts to the Flipgrid. I'm just asking you to say your full name and your class period because I have all of my classes going on one grid. So as I'm reading through them this way, it'll be easier for me to just organize myself. Your full name, the class period. You're going to tell us which team. Please call the team by name. And then I'm going to ask you to say one positive thing and then one area of growth, just one of each. If you have more, great. But otherwise, like that's just the baseline foundation. It takes several hours for Zoom to convert this video into an actual video. And then because of the length of it, it takes a little bit of a time for me to upload it to YouTube. So I probably won't have this video up until later in the evening. But the Flipgrid video, I'm not asking, just like everything else, I'm not asking until our next cycle anyway. So you have several days in between to do that. And again, it's only 90 seconds, so it really won't take you, it's not a devastating amount of time. But in case you wanted to review it, I will have the recording up probably by this evening. Thank you guys so much for your wonderful work. I'm so excited. I have 4 pages of notes to go back through, and hopefully I'll have feedback for you by tomorrow morning. That's my goal. All right, guys, you have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for your attention. Be safe and well too. Bye, guys.
Have a good day.